So we're back with Art of the Occult. Sort of did a section on Kabbalah and got the earlier one yesterday. Something I found really interesting. I've been watching a playthrough, A Symphony of the Night, by Epic Namebro, and there's this sort of librarian character, and just sort of like the dress, just sort of like the overall vibes, it's very similar to some of the paintings featuring alchemists that we kind of covered. Fortunately, I cannot figure out. It seems to just really not want to switch over, and I think it's an issue with Prism, because I kind of just did some testing in the normal camera app, and it was doing what I would expect it to, but for whatever, so it seems like it's within Prism is this sort of trying one last thing, see if I can get it. The word theosophy, meaning God's wisdom, was first used in writing during the 3rd to 6th century by the Alexandrian Neoplatonic philosophers as a term to indicate an experiential knowledge attained through spiritual means. Over time, various mystics and spiritual movements in the West adopted the word theosophy in their teachings until in 1875, Helena Petrovna Blavatsky and a group of like-minded colleagues founded the Theosophical Society in New York, thus bringing the term back into the mainstream. These individuals espoused that theosophy was not a religion, but a system synonymous with eternal truth, which underlies not only all religions, but also philosophy and science. The aim of its founders was to liberate man from bondage by presenting a philosophy of life that would show him how to find the truth within himself. Born to an aristocratic family in Russia in 1831, Madame Blavatsky was a spiritualist and clairvoyant, and was said to have been possessed of certain psychic powers. From a young age, she had been fascinated by the Hermetic tradition, traveling the world in search of esoteric wisdom. Some people say she visited spiritual masters in Tibet, while others attribute her with less aspirational travels and experiences. She had an illegitimate child, worked in a circus, and earned a living as a medium in Paris. An extraordinary and controversial character, Blavatsky has been called many things: the fountainhead of modern occult thought, a trailblazing psychologist of the visionary mind, one of the most accomplished, ingenious, and interesting impostors in history. Contributions to the occult are numerous. In 1877, she published Isis Unveiled, which outlined her theosophical worldview, a synthesis of science, religion, and philosophy. The Secret Doctrine, published in 1888, was an influential example of the revival of interest in occult ideas in the modern age, in particular because of its claim to reconcile ancient Eastern wisdom such as karma and reincarnation with modern science. Blavatsky alleged that its contents had been revealed to her by the Mahatmas, who had retained the knowledge of humanity's spiritual history, knowledge that was now possible in part to reveal. The most fundamental teaching of theosophy, according to the Theosophical Society, is that all people have the same spiritual and physical origin, because they are essentially of one and the same essence. That essence is one, infinite, uncreate, and eternal. Whether we call it God or nature, its objectives concern forming a universal brotherhood of humanity without distinction of race, creed, sex, caste, or color. Encouraging the study of comparative religion, philosophy, and science, and investigating unexplained laws of nature and the powers latent in human beings, considering the casual yet wonderfully profound philosophies and tenets of theosophy, one might imagine this liberating way of thinking would appeal to the free-spirited souls of the day who possessed an artistic temperament and creative tendencies, and who were seeking a higher cosmic truth. One would be correct in assuming so, for amongst the members of the Theosophical Society were a great number of artists, many of whom are considered the founders of the modern abstract art movement: Vasily Kandinsky, František Kupka, Piet Mondrian, and Hilma af Klint. It was inevitable that artists might turn their attention to spirituality at the dawn of the materialistic age, and theosophy gave them a perspective that became the fundamental groundwork of their beliefs. From this vantage point, they believed they were able to see beyond the natural world to otherworldly realms. They stood in this doorway between worlds as messengers. Communicating this knowledge became objective of their art. Madame Blavatsky wrote the following of artists. Thoreau pointed out there are artists in life, persons who can change the color of a day and make it beautiful to those with whom they come in contact. Claim that there are adepts, masters in life, who make it divine. As in all other arts, is it not the greatest art of all, this which affects the very atmosphere in which we live? That it is the most important is seen at once when we remember that every person who draws the breath of life affects the mental and moral atmosphere of the world and helps to color the day for those about him. Perhaps she intended it as a whimsical musing, but I prefer to read it literally as an appreciation for these creative messengers of higher truths, cosmic knowledge, the adepts who make it divine. Jean Deville maintained throughout the course of his life that art should be the expression of a higher spiritual truth. Not much other than second-hand accounts are known of the mysterious Mrs. Stuart Merrill in Deville's most enigmatic work. But the artist was obviously struck by her strange beauty and immortalized her otherworldly gaze and dramatic energies for the ages in this portrait. Influential and prolific French sculptor Émile-Antoine Bourdelle was a student of Auguste Rodin and an important figure in the Art Deco movement. His portrait of Indian spiritual leader and philosopher Jiddu Krishnamurti considered by the Theosophical Society to be the incarnation of Maitreya Buddha, was apparently drawn from memory. It is interesting to note that later Krishnamurti severed his ties to Theosophy and the Theosophical Society, declaring independence from all religious, philosophical, and cultural disciplines and practices. Influential painter Peter Cornelis became a member of the Dutch section of the Theosophical Society. In 1909, and much of the artist's works for the rest of his life was inspired by a search for that spiritual knowledge. While Mondrian was still experimenting with symbolist art, he painted Evolution, a triptych that made use of mystical triangles, hexagons, and stars of David. The images read from left to right, depict a movement from the material to the spiritual, a common concept in Theosophy. Luigi Carlo Filippo Russolo was an Italian futurist painter, composer, builder of experimental musical instruments, and the author of the manifesto, The Art of Noises. He designed and constructed a number of noise-generating devices called intonatori. Although Russolo does not mention Theosophy explicitly in his theoretical writings about music, scholars conjecture that the artist and his futurist comrades had likely absorbed theosophical ideas through their fascination for late 19th century French thought. Additionally, through his synthetic investigations, he had no doubt devoted intense hours of study to the theory of vibrations, acoustic science, as well as the theosophical theories about the forms produced by music. Thought Forms, a record of clairvoyant investigation, is a theosophical book compiled by A. Besant and C.W. Leadbeater, members of the Theosophical Society, regarding visualization of thoughts, experience, emotions, and music. Drawings of the thought forms were performed by painters Varley, Prince, and McFarlane. This one here looks like could equally have been featured in the section on Kabbalah. Hilma af Klint was a Swedish artist, spiritualist, and seeker whose esoteric, ecstatic works have become known as some of the first examples of abstract art. Af Klint became greatly involved in various religious and philosophical movements in her lifetime. It was theosophy that would shape her and her work for years to come. Reginald Willoughby MacColl was an English painter whose best-known work is The Path. He joined the Theosophical Society after meeting Helena Petrovna Blavatsky in London, after which the scope of his work began to change toward mysticism and symbolism. In the artist's words, the path is the way by which the human soul must pass in its evolution to full spiritual self-consciousness. The work hangs at the headquarters of the Theosophical Society in Pasadena, California. Emil Bistrom was an American artist who lived in New York and Taos, New Mexico, and was known for his modernist work. Bistrom brought a fascinating array of spiritual, philosophical, and scientific traditions to his painting. A theosophist who founded the Transcendental Painting Group, he wrote of universalism and the essential oneness of all things, and explored these concepts in works such as Oversoul. Finnish artist Ilona Harima was fascinated with Oriental art forms and cultures and was particularly interested by the visual world of Indian and Chinese art. In 1936, she became a member of the Theosophical Society, where she was encouraged by the artist Hilma af Klint to read the writings of Rudolf Steiner. She later produced some large paintings under that specific influence. In L'Amour des Âmes, Theosophist and Belgian painter Jean de Ville's distinctive style is seen to great effect in his use of gentle curves, contours, and subtle contrasts. This painting suggests a theme of male and female energy being united to form a state of wholeness and complete unity of being. Adelian is thinking this about the Af Klint version too. It's like these two in this very book, not even counting her other one, she's introduced them at least 3 different times so far. So it's kind of, I don't know, it just feels weird to me, thus, her feeling the need to give a blurb about the artist on each of these when it's already like the 3rd or 4th time in the same book. Was a French symbolist painter whose evocative works are the stuff of mysteries and nightmares. Rodin explored Buddhist and Hindu writings, as well as religious, syncretic, and theosophical texts from French writers like Edouard Schur. Rodin said of his works, "My drawings inspire and are not to be defined. They place us, as does music, in the ambiguous realm of the undetermined." Artist and publisher Melchior Lecter is best known for his glass paintings, drawings, and decorative designs for books, calendars, catalogs, ex libris, and posters. Symbolic style combined Gothic elements with Art Nouveau. In his paintings and writings, Lecter integrated ideas of both the medieval German and the ancient Indian mystics. His travels to India intensified his long-held interest in theosophy and Buddhist mysticism, themes which later became prevalent in his work, although he continued his involvement with Catholic mysticism and theology. Agnes Pelton was a visionary symbolist painter. His abstract art, full of deep solitude, gentle, healing color, and mystical symbolism, were creative works arrived at via extensive meditation and trance. For most of her career, Pelton chose to live away from the distractions of a major arts center. Her isolation from the mainstream meant that her paintings were relatively unknown during her lifetime and in the decades thereafter. Czech painter and graphic artist František Kupka was a pioneer and co-founder of the early phases of the abstract art movement and Orphic Cubism. Kupka started out as a spiritualist medium, widening his interest as an adult into Eastern religions, astrology, and theosophy. It should be noted that he did not become a theosophist, nor did he embrace all of its tenets. The motto over one of the entrance gates of a Greek temple at Delphi reads, Nosce te ipsum. Well, who could argue with that? There's no denying that to know oneself is indeed a lovely sentiment. But perhaps we should start by getting to know the philosopher who purportedly uttered these words, the legendary Hermes Trismegistus. The mystical, well, I believe that's a point of contention. The mythical Hermes Trismegistus looms large in the tradition of Western esotericism, and his origins can be traced back to Thoth, the Egyptian god of magic and writing. A new cult was born when the Greeks under Alexander the Great conquered Egypt in 332 BC. And saw in Thoth the equivalent of their god Hermes, who coincidentally was also a god of magic and writing. Hermes Trismegistus is first referred to in the Greek magical papyri. In one such reference, he is called Hermes the Elder, chief of all magicians. Another he is referred to as thrice great. For in ancient Egypt, the superlative was constructed by repeating a word 3 times, an epithet derived from the god with which Hermes had become assimilated. Thus was the great, the great, the great. The Hermetica are the surviving writings attributed to Hermes Trismegistus, and are mostly presented as dialogues in which a teacher, generally identified as Hermes, enlightens a disciple. The texts from the basis of Hermeticism, the Asclepius and the Corpus Hermeticum, are the most important of the Hermetica, and contain philosophies of the divine, the cosmos, mind, and nature. Some considered more practical or technical discuss astrology, magic, alchemy, and related concepts. Another famous tract is the Emerald Tablet, a cryptic piece of the Hermetica reputed to contain the secret of the prima materia and its transmutation. It was highly regarded by European alchemists as the foundation of their art and taught the much recognized occult maxim, as above, so below. According to the Emerald Tablet, the wisdom of the universe can be subdivided into 3 spheres: alchemy, astrology, and clergy. Many Hermetic texts were lost to Western culture during the Middle Ages, but rediscovered in Byzantine copies and popularized in Italy during the Renaissance. The Hermetica provided an electrifying impetus in the development of Renaissance thought and culture, having a profound impact on alchemy and modern magic as well as influencing philosophers of the day. Much of the importance of Hermeticism arises from its connection with the development of science during the time 13 to 1600 AD. The significance that lent to the idea of influencing nature led many scientists to look to magic, which it was thought could put nature to the test by employing experiments. The concept of Hermeticism as a religious, philosophical, and esoteric tradition also gave rise to several occult organizations and movements. Rosicrucianism was a Hermetic/Christian movement dating back to the 15th century. The Rosicrucian order consisted of a system in which members moved up in rank and gained access to more knowledge. Once a member was deemed able to understand the knowledge, they moved on to the next grade. There were 3 steps to their spiritual path: philosophy, Kabbalah, and divine magic. Their movement was symbolized by the rose, the soul, and the cross, the body of 4 elements. Thus, the Christian symbolism of the cross was reinterpreted as representing the human soul crucified on the cross of the material plane. Freemasonry emerged in the 17th century as another iteration of the interest in the occult that led to Rosicrucianism. It describes itself as a beautiful system of morality, veiled in allegory and illustrated by symbols, and while it does not deal directly with magic, it does touch upon it closely. Most of the Freemasonry philosophy stems from the self-knowledge and understanding inherent to Hermeticism, and some of its rituals recreate the cycle of birth and death found in alchemy. The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn was a magical order of late 19th century, early 20th century, which practiced various forms of theurgy and spiritual occultism. It is noted as possibly the single most considerable influence on 20th century Western Hermeticism. The Golden Dawn system was based on an initiated hierarchical order similar to that of Masonic Lodge. However, women were admitted on an equal basis with men. From the tracing boards used in the instruction of new members to a Masonic Lodge, to the various arcane symbols and glyphs of the Golden Dawn, to the more abstract forms of symbolism and metaphysical iconography used by contemporary artists such as Pilar Zeta, the Western Hermetic tradition is associated with artistic works of cryptic obscurity and enigmatic visual images rich in emblem and allegory. These images, notes writer A.C. Evans, reflect an instinctive understanding of the role of the artist as a receiver of visions and an explorer of the innermost recesses of the human mind. You might also say that these artists and initiates have taken Hermes Trismegistus's adage of know thyself very much to heart. In trying to find a language to communicate his mystical perceptions, German philosopher, Christian mystic, and Lutheran Protestant theologian Jacob Bohm drew upon alchemical ideas and Hermetic imagery. Bohm was an important influence on the ideas of the English Romantic poet, artist, and mystic William Blake. In addition to Swiss psychiatrist and psychoanalyst Carl Jung, who made numerous references to Bohm in his writings. Hermes Trismegistus is the alleged author of the sacred text forming the basis of Hermeticism. Many Christian writers considered him to be a wise pagan prophet who foresaw the coming of Christianity. The addition of thrice great was added to his name because he knew the 3 parts of the wisdom of the universe: alchemy, astrology, and theurgy. Rosicrucianism is a spiritual and cultural branch of Hermeticism, combining references to Kabbalah, alchemy, and Christian mysticism. Elements of Rosicrucianism were combined in the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. Yeah, that doesn't tell us anything. She didn't say. Earlier. Zul Solar was the adopted name of Oscar Augustin Alejandro Schulz Solari, an avant-garde occultist, painter, sculptor, writer, and inventor of imaginary languages. A mystic who sought out spiritually minded individuals throughout his life, Zul Solar learned a secret method for attaining mystic visions, derived from the practices of the Hermetic Order, the Golden Dawn, taught to him by Aleister Crowley himself. Ramon Lull was a mathematician, philosopher, theologian, mystic, and writer from the Kingdom of Majorca. In this illustration depicting the Hermetic philosophy of nature from his opera 3092 Chemica, you can see the Hermetic tree of life with the 7 main branches and 10 heads, symbolizing the 7 planets and the 10 spheres of the Kabbalistic tradition. As prolific a writer as he was a painter, Nicholas Roerich, visionary and world citizen, writes in Fiery Stronghold of the immeasurably powerful mountains of India. Over the snowy peaks of the Himalayas burns a bright glow, brighter than the stars and the fantastic flashes of lightning. Fueled by a lifelong love of the paranormal, visual and sonic, artist Pilar Zeta's metaphysical iconography and music exist in futuristic, surreal, and elegant spaces. Her work functions as a form of practical magic in a machine-centric world, connecting different mediums through a singular transcendent vision. The mother of the world, how much of that which is tremendously stirring and moving is blended in this sacred image of all ages and all peoples that rose spiritually inspired artist and poet Nicholas Roerich to womanhood. These feelings are stunningly expressed in his work. Roerich's most inspiring images rendered with tender majesty in deep tones of blue and violet. This tracing board by Hosea Browning is an example of one of the artists and Freemasons' popular recurring designs. Used by Freemasons as visual aids during ceremonies, tracing boards are intricately painted or printed illustrations depicting the various emblems and the symbols of the Masonic journey. They can be wooden, painted and gilded, drawn on cloth or paper, or even made out of stone. Typically, there is a tracing board for each of the 3 ceremonies: apprentice, fellowcraft, and finally, the degree of Master Mason. Some tracing board designs became particularly popular, leading to some repetition of favored design features, and the boards by Hosea Bowring were said to have raised the standard for all who came after. The paintings of artist William Jones are each the result of an investigation of a spiritual tradition, practice, or personal experience, including a variety of symbols from different traditions. Because of the commonalities of what they represent, he notes, my figurative pieces are allegorical and the abstract pieces are esoteric. A general talismanic figure is an illustration of an angel or deity constructed according to the predetermined set of correspondences, colors, and symbols. The image then, consecrated and charged, becomes a sacred icon. By utilizing the chosen colors and symbolism, anyone, according to Golden Dawn magic, can then create a general talismanic image of a given angel. William Alexander Ayton was a British Anglican clergyman, a member of the Successor Order of the Golden Dawn, who did just that. Aleister Crowley, occultist, ceremonial magician, poet, and painter, described by one newspaper as the wickedest man in the world, apparently liked to paint a nice landscape. Who knew? Known more for his occult reputation, his landscapes and portraits and trance paintings were created as part of his occult practice and were imagined influenced by symbolism and expressionism. For Crowley, art was not about replicating observed subjects, but about expression. He noted, one should not paint nature at all. One should paint the will. Marguerite Frieda Harris was an artist and feminist who later became an associate of the occultist Aleister Crowley. She is best known for the design of Crowley's Thoth tarot deck, which by Crowley's own admission was originally intended to be traditional. However, Harris encouraged him to commit his own views to the project. With allusions to astrology, the Kabbalah, and Egyptian mythology, the Thoth tarot is a luminous embodiment of both Harris's artistic skills and Crowley's symbology. This is a prototype created for the infamous deck, but didn't make it into the final edition. Neither Harris nor Crowley lived to see their tarot deck published. So that brings us to the end of part 2. I guess we'll see what she means by practitioners, because, I'd consider an alchemist a practitioner, and the section we just covered, those are practitioners. So I guess we'll see what she means. There's like a couple things that seemed wonky categorization in this one. But yeah, so that'll be tomorrow. So at the rate we've been going, it looks like we've got about 2 days left. But yes, that'll wrap things up for today.